The House Judiciary Committee voted to authorize a dozen subpoenas. They target current and former administration officials like Jared Kushner and Jeff Sessions, along with National Enquirer publisher David Pecker. All people the committee's Democratic chairman says connect their ongoing investigation into allegations of obstruction of justice, public corruption, and abuses of power.
Today, we focus on 12 additional witnesses. These include government officials who worked or continue to work in close proximity to the president. These witnesses also include those outside of government who have critical information in connection with our investigation. We will not rest until we obtain their testimony and documents so that this committee and Congress can do the work that the Constitution and the American people expect of us.
And not surprisingly, today's vote fell predictably along party lines, with the Republican ranking member criticizing what he called a subpoena binge.
If the goal is truly to get information or testimony, our chair is failing. But as is repeatedly said, if the goal is to political theater, we're winning.
Joining me now, NBC News correspondent Ken Dilanian and former federal prosecutor and adjunct professor at Columbia University, Anne-Marie McAvoy. Thanks to both of you for being here. Ken, I want to start with you. What does Chairman Nadler expect to and think that he can learn with these 12 subpoenas?
Well, this is a high-profile list, Kristen. In addition to Kushner and Sessions, it includes, Rod Rosenstein, former chief of staff John Kelly, and Corey Lewandowski, the president's former campaign chairman. Public testimony from any of these guys is the kind of thing that we would cover gavel to gavel. And that is the aim of the Democrats here. They want to put this evidence in front of the American people. Unfortunately for them, the White House is going to make claims that will seek to block the testimony of many or most of these witnesses, and it may have to be litigated in the courts. They may have more luck with the private citizens, for example, David Pecker of the National Enquirer, who really won't have any executive privilege claim to stand behind.
And do you expect most of this to center around obstruction, the question of obstruction in the wake of the Mueller report?
Yes, that's exactly what Judiciary is focusing on. Now, the House Intelligence Committee is continuing to investigate Russia collusion and the counterintelligence questions, but Judiciary is focused squarely on the questions of obstruction. For example, they'd like Lewandowski to testify publicly about the Mueller report's allegation that Trump ordered him to have Jeff Sessions walk back his recusal. The American public, most of whom has not read the Mueller report, is likely unaware of that key evidence, which they see as an episode of obstruction.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.